Hey everyone, I am so excited. We are here today with Hannah of Hannah Holding Space, who is a queer and perinatal mental health therapist. Hey Hannah, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. I'm so excited to talk to you today. Mental health is something that I love talking about in general, but I love that you also work in the queer and the trans space. So we're going to get some more detailed information today from you. So can you give us a little bit of background of how you got into mental health and how you got into the trans and queer space specifically?
Oh my gosh. So it's been a winding road. So I started with, I would say I had like a big interest in birth. I found it fascinating. I would like nerd out about it. I also, in college, I majored in women and gender studies. So I was really focused on, cool. Yes. Um, women's issues, queer theory, feminist issues. I decided to get my master's in social welfare at UCLA, to become a social worker and ended up becoming a therapist and getting my LCSW. And I kind of found a way to merge my like passion for birth with the therapy and mental health world by specializing in perinatal mental health. And while I was doing that, realizing how there just is a huge gap of services and care for queer and trans folks who are having babies and needing that perinatal mental health support. And so that's really what brought me to my private practice and choosing to really center the LGBTQIA plus community, and particularly those families who are having babies.
That's awesome. I was a women's studies major in the 90s, and it wasn't called gender studies. It was women's
Before it
studies.
was cool. Yeah. You were like, OG.
It was not cool at the time. It was LGB, and the B was controversial. That's that was
Yeah. And you know what? That wasn't that long ago.
no, it really wasn't. It really wasn't. So, love that you are specializing in the queer and trans community. I think it's something that we definitely need more attention to. And I'm curious about, I'm going to ask some questions from some general perspectives. Why would someone need to seek out a therapist who specializes in trans and queer mental health?
Well, I think like any of us looking for a therapist, right? We want to find someone who is competent, right, in our background and our identity, right? A therapist doesn't have to know everything about, right, your culture, your background, your identity, or even be a part of it, but to be able to feel at ease, right, in that space, and especially therapy where you're, really being asked to be very vulnerable, and um you like people need to feel really safe in that, and I think that queer and trans folks particularly, you know, feel a sense of ease when they know that they're in a space, and I include myself as a queer person, right? When we know that we're in a space where our identities are centered, right? Like it feels very different going into a space where it's kind of like it's a straight space, but we include, queer folks, or we are inclusive of, versus this is a queer space, and so then, clients don't have to feel that weight of doing the emotional labor of educating a provider about their identity, about their pronouns, about certain, just queer related issues, whether that's around transitioning, coming out, just the culture, just the things of life that we all deal with. But yeah, I think it just takes that burden off and it just creates a really safe space.
Yeah, it feels like when you come home at the end of the day and you can take your shoes off, right?
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
comfortable.
You're comfortable, right? There's no having to like mask or like um assimilate or make somebody feel comfortable with your identity. It's like, no, just this is for you to just be your whole self. And yeah, like you said, just take your shoes off, get comfortable.
Yeah. I know when I was doing massage, I had clients all the time that I really wanted to make sure had culturally competent care. And I think that's such a piece that, isn't talked about in a lot of circles, but needs to be more put to the forefront. Having someone who maybe looks like you or maybe feels like you or maybe just feels, I think the overarching umbrella is to feel safe, right? When you're getting any sort of care, especially during your reproductive journey, because that's already such a wild time. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't
Wild,
want to also,
really vulnerable. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that leads us to a real interesting question is why would queer folks want to be having babies at this time in the world?
Yeah. Um, it like really amazes me, to be honest. I think that's part of the why I love birth to begin with is it's just so mind-blowing and miraculous that we can do this and that we create life and bring life into the world. It's just every time I think about it, I'm still like full of awe and wonder. And I think it's really just says so much that there's a growing amount, of queer folks choosing to have babies. So while reproductive rights are under attack, while LGBTQ rights are under attack, right? Particularly trans rights, are just being hacked away at. And yet there's still a growing number of trans and queer folks who are trying to conceive, who are going through, the fertility process or adoption or fostering. Um, and so I think that it says a lot about, our drive toward life, toward futures, toward healthy futures, and wanting to raise like healthy and thriving families, and a lot of trans and queer people who are choosing to have children, you know, aren't coming from, right, like super supportive, loving families and are really bringing with them the model of chosen family, right, which is a really core tenet, within queer culture of bringing together community, bringing together chosen family, when you don't that falls outside of kind of the dominant structure of what the culture says family is supposed to be. So I think that there's like a lot of resilience in that. I think anyone who wants to see a more like resilient, thriving, community-centered future, like we should all be supporting queer folks who want to have babies because it really exemplifies that.
I think you brought up such a great point about chosen family, and I think a lot of this is an issue for a lot of people, right? The having of the kids brings up a lot of your upbringing and what you loved about it and what you didn't love about it, right? So I think that the reproductive journey is a time where you get to make choices for yourself and how you choose to parent. Maybe that's similar, maybe it's very not similar to the way you were raised. So it's really interesting that yours, it's almost like I would think it would be more difficult for queer and trans folks, but then in some ways they've already done the work of chosen family.
Right, of having to really like, yeah, exist outside of, right, like whatever preconceived notions, right? I think that's, yeah, you're exactly right. Like it gives queer folks a certain edge or at least right and a resilience because from a younger age, right, or from younger ages, they're having to create identity and an understanding of life and future, right? That's totally outside the prescribed, path. Hmm.
Absolutely. In some ways, it's way more challenging. And then in some ways, it's almost possibly freeing to create your own path. And having had to go through the challenges, I always say challenges are an opportunity for growth. I try and reframe that, but they've had the opportunity for growth in those ways already. So it's interesting and something I wouldn't have necessarily thought of.
Oh yeah, totally. That's what we would, or that's what I would describe as being queer joy, right? Is the freedom that comes from like breaking outside of kind of the cultural norms and finding more authentic expressions of your identity, of yourself, and your voice, and finding other people who also are living into that authenticity. Yeah.
I I very much advocate living authentically.
Yes.
I love the work you're doing, and I think it's definitely needed. I'm curious to know what other providers and practitioners refer to you.
Mhm. Yeah, I get referrals from other, mental health providers. So I get some referrals from psychiatrists, who are prescribing medications to folks. And let's see, I get referrals from OBGYNs, medical providers. There's a program at UCLA that's UCLA Hospital that's really centered on perinatal mental health, and they do more crisis work. And so they might refer out to some of their patients who are looking for a more like long-term mental health provider. So things like that. I also, people find me, whether through my website or directories when they're looking specifically for someone who's specialized in either LGBTQ issues or perinatal issues or both. And I do see both individuals and couples.
That's good to know. And then are there any do you ever do any group work or are you individuals and couples only?
No, I do groups. So I'm in the process right now of actually trying to get two groups up and running. So group therapy. So it's more not less of like a open support group, more of like a structured 8-week session, right, with the same people where you're really doing that therapy work. You're just doing it in the group setting and really being able to work through, those inner knots that are coming up, but with people who are going through something similar. So, one of the groups I'm going to be running soon is the fertility, LGBTQ, queer and trans fertility group. So, people who are trying to conceive or going through the fertility process, and then queer and trans parent group.
Those are really great resources. I would
Mhm.
think fertility would be a huge topic.
Yeah.
Um, do you work with a lot of the big fertility clinics, or do you work more one-on-one with individual fertility doctors or
Yeah.
everyone?
Yeah, I mean, more, I would say I'm getting referrals more like one-on-one, more one-offs. I would love to, right, form a relationship with a clinic and hey, I'm open for that and available. Um, so yeah, more like, yeah, getting those individual clients who maybe are looking. But I think, even in the fertility world, you know, eh, doctors are like getting through the day, right? They're seeing so many patients, they're doing so much. And so I do think that there's an opportunity there for a lot more mental health awareness and kind of mindedness, like mental health mindedness, to be a part of the fertility journey. I don't think people are aware that, a lot of predictors for anxiety, depression, postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, all the perinatal, mental mood and anxiety disorders, right? That they start, right, way before pregnancy, particularly through the fertility journey. And the fertility journey has a huge effect on, people's mental health outcomes as they're going through the process. So, yeah, I think there's an opportunity in general for that to become a more normalized and just like woven in conversation in the fertility process.
I agree. And I will say from the fertility doctors that I personally know, I think they are much more open-minded. I think you're right, like they are very busy, but they are much more open-minded to incorporating other therapies as well. Um, and because it's such an innovative field. I mean, the field is changing so fast
Yeah.
every year,
Mhm.
that you, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there were clinics that were starting to have someone like you on staff because it just makes sense. I mean, I feel like the mind body connection is also kind of closing the gap. I mean, it's something obviously you've always known, I've known for a long time. Like a lot of practitioners are like, yes, finally, but I feel like it's becoming more mainstream
Yeah.
that the mind and the body are actually way more connected. It's not a distant connection, it's an immediate connection.
Right. Yeah. So well put.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right, right, that there's more awareness and depending on maybe where you are and things like that. But yeah, just to continue building, building that bridge and kind of forming those connections where it is just really like whole person approach.
Agreed. And speaking of where you are, do you work in person? Do you work virtually? Are you specifically in California? Do you work in multiple states?
Yeah, so all my sessions currently are virtual. TBD having like a part-time in-person space in Los Angeles, but I am able to see clients virtually in California, in New York, and New Jersey.
Great. Okay,
Any
that's
one of
great.
those states can find me, and as long
Awesome.
as you're in that state, we can have our sessions.
Great. That's good to know. That's a good range. And can you let everyone know how to find you? Website, social media, what's the easiest way to get in touch with you if they're looking for your services?
Yeah. So my website is hannahholdingspace.com. HANNAHHOLDINGSPACE.com. My Instagram, which is, I post here and there. I'm not fully, on the
You're doing
gram.
great.
But you can find me hannah.holding.space is my handle. And then I think those are the best ways. I'm also on Alma. Alma has a really strong directory of therapists. So you can find me on the Alma's directory, and you can also find me on Psychology Today.
Okay, good to know. Alma, ALMA, correct?
Correct.
Just learned about that directory recently, so that's good to know.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and to give us such great information about all these topics. And I really appreciate your time. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Sally. This was really fun.
Yeah, totally.